Okay. Yes. Okay, so I think we can start.
Okay.
So, yeah, please.
How shall we start?
So it's like you want. How would you like the things to be? So maybe,
Okay.
yes, yeah, maybe I'll
Why
start.
don't you
Yeah.
introduce these people? Because, yeah.
Yes, I think everyone will introduce himself. Is going to be better.
Oh,
I
good.
think no, there's no need to introduce you. Everyone knows Lama Sarah Harding, so
Uh-oh.
no
Okay.
need to do that. But maybe yes, everyone can. So maybe I give names and then you introduce yourselves. So I'm going to look at the order that I have here on the screen. So first have Tiago.
Hi, good morning. It's a wonderful opportunity to have this talk with you, Lama. So I'm a student from Chadugompa, Brazil.
Oh.
I live in Lama Saring's center.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she sends you a lot of love, and she misses
sweet.
you.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, thank you very much. Same, I miss her, and gosh, it's been so many years.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And how long have you been studying Tibetan?
Tibetan, I studied quite by myself, but I didn't went far. But now from the beginning of this year, I'm starting to do the Dharma Sagar program.
Okay. It is a Tibetan class, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tiago.
And then I have Robert.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm also a student of Lama Saring. I live in Brazil.
Nice. Okay.
But I'm originally from the UK. I've lived in Brazil for over 10 years. And I started studying Tibetan this year. Well, I started studying last year, the kind of trying to get my head around everything. And I started studying more seriously this year with Dharma Sagar as well. So I'm still just a beginner.
Okay, that's great. You've lost your British accent.
Yeah, I don't think I ever really had one, to be
honest. Okay. Fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next I have Rafaela.
Hello, my name is Rafaela. I'm a student from Chadugompa.
Okay.
And I've been studying Tibetan by myself for a little while, and now with Dharma Sagar since the beginning of the year.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, I feel like I'm back at Chadugompa. Yeah.
Next is Facundo.
Good morning. Here, I'm from Argentina. I started to study Tibetan just the 2 last months, so it's really I'm a really beginner, and yeah, this is it.
Okay. Well, good. Thank you, Facundo. Who's next?
Next, I have Nerea. We're not hearing you. No.
Unmute.
Yeah. It seems the microphone is not plugged in.
There you are. Okay, good.
Yeah. So I'm Spanish. I live in Brussels. I give a hand here interpreting English to French.
Okay.
Samye Zong, Kamakon Rinpoche and Situ Rinpoche student.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm Spanish, starting also to do interpretation into Spanish and written translations, which I haven't done a lot yet, not in the Dharma field. So excited to start translating texts.
Yeah, but then you're already a translator, yeah?
And and I've been enjoying Tibetan for some time.
Oh, okay, good. And where are you physically, geographically? Where are you?
Brussels, Belgium.
You're in Brussels. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Next, I have Marina.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. It's
Hi, thank you. Yeah, it is morning here. Therefore
Yeah.
the tea.
yeah, I'm from Argentina, it's Facundo.
Oh, good.
I'm student in Kahir Tekchen Chilin here with Lama Rinchen Kandra.
Okay.
I began my Tibetan classes this year with Dharma Sagar too, so I'm kind of new in this new world.
Yeah, well, it's a good world.
Yes, the best. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
And then I have Angelica.
Hi, I am
Hi.
Angelica or Angelica. I'm from Colombia. I live in the United States. I studied Tibetan in India mostly, and I've translated for His Holiness Karmapa, and I'm student of Khenpo Sutin Gyalpo Rinpoche.
Oh, yes, great. Yeah.
And he told me to read your book when I was a very
He
new
tells him
baby.
I feel like I should give him a cut of the, yeah. Which book did he tell you to read? Anchut?
The one
Yeah.
with Lepton.
Yeah, he loves that one. He's my best promoter of that book. It made it the best selling Sadra book because of Khenpo Tsultrim. I just had a visitor from Colombia last night stay over. That's nice that you're here. Where in the States are you?
I'm in upstate New York in the KTD monastery, if you know.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. It just all of a sudden got the heat wave after.
I've been watching that. So you're feeling it. So we just got like snowstorm after planting all our flowers and everything. But it's so weird. Yeah. And so,
years.
yeah. And there's a Lama in Colombia that did a 3 retreat, a Colombian in Bogota. Do you know him?
Yes, I do. I've met him.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I was there translating for Trungpa Rinpoche one time. And yeah, nice. Okay. Thank you.
Next, I have Elisa.
Hello.
Hi, Elisa. Hi.
Hi. My name is Elisa. I'm from Spain and I live near Barcelona.
Okay.
And I've been in contact with the Samyedzong Barcelona Rinpoche for quite a lot of years, many years. And I've been cooperating with translations and proofreadings, doing simultaneous interpretation from English into Spanish, mainly when Sam Lama was here.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And then, well, I've been also studying Tibetan for a long time now, but not continuously. Unfortunately. And well, at the beginning, it was because I needed to read Tibetan that I started. So, and then, well, I've been in Dharamsala also studying it, and then I interrupted it. So now I thought it was a golden opportunity to be able to do that, because actually I studied at university as a translator, normal translator. So I thought, what could be best that doing it in the Dharma,
Yeah.
So that's why I'm here. Especially.
Oh, well, you would have a lot to teach me. That's very interesting. Yeah, no, I just made it all up. So
no,
I didn't learn anything. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I have Samam Jamchuk, who is recently changed his name. I'll let him explain that.
Okay.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Sonan Jamtu. I'm from Spain, from the monastery of Akon Rinpoche too.
Oh, sure.
And I'm not really a translator. I learn English watching movies, so I didn't go to university. So that's it. I just help the monastery with whatever I can. Sometimes how do you say, transcribing
Yes, that's
English
right.
teachings to
Mhm.
Spain and to Spanish, like that.
Well, if you're transcribing English to Spanish, that's translating, right? Okay.
But not really trustable translation.
Yeah, not really presentable. Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sure that's wonderful. That's a great way to, even if it's kind of boring, it's a great way to learn. So good. Thank you.
Then I have Dani.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I already met you in Dharma Sagar last year in your talk.
Okay.
It was very nice. But I'm from Brazil. I live now in Portugal. And I have been translating texts and also transcribing. I transcribe with a lot of movies and videos for KTT in Brazil, the Karma Kagyu Center.
Okay.
And from 2020, since 2020, I have been also interpreting for His Holiness Karmapa from English to Portuguese for Tessitura Rinpoche, and also recently for Tergar International for Mingyur Rinpoche, Khenpo Kunga, Lama Trinley. And I also help Nyingma Center in Brazil, connected to Jigme Punsok. They are a very small center. And so inside Dharma Sagar, I started helping them. And although I don't have really any connection with Nyingma, it's been a very nice experience to work so closely with this small center. And that's it. And this year I'm also working for Dharma Sagar. But honestly, I really want to be a translator. So I hope that soon I can come back to just study.
Do you want to be a literary translator or an oral translator?
Both. I hope
both.
I really like to do both. Yes.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Yeah, first I was very afraid of oral interpretation. I said, I will never be able to do that. It's too difficult. But now I really enjoy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I shouldn't say this at Dharma Sagar, but yeah, I find it difficult too. I retired from that pretty early on.
Especially from Tibetan. That I have no idea how I will be able to do that. It's insane.
Yeah, you will, especially if you're forced to. Okay, people keep joining, so we got to keep going here.
Yes. So next I have Nuno.
Hello.
Hello.
My name's Nuno, as you already know. I'm from Chile, and I live in Chile. I started practicing a few years ago in Spain with Khenpo Nyima, and I've been translating mostly from English into Spanish and also interpreting almost since day one, and more. And currently I'm participating as a translator in the secrettradition.org and
good.
a few other places. And yeah, I'm happy to be able to learn Tibetan. It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I'm really thankful for this opportunity.
Oh, great. Okay. Wow, we have from every country almost and counting here.
Yeah.
Yes. Next we have Gustavo.
Hello, I'm from Brazil too. Like many others here, I am from Chagdugompa.
Good.
And so I practice in Chagdugompa, but my work as a translator, I have been currently helping Dotu Rinpoche in Aryatara's net.
Oh.
So doing both simultaneous translation from English and helping subtitles from his videos. And also now I'm translating the prayer book that they use into Portuguese. So it's basically that. I'm kind of new to translating, and as a Brazilian, I think all of us need more translations from directly from Tibetan, because all of our translations are from English. So
yeah, you got to get rid of that English. Yeah.
Yeah, this program is very great.
Wonderful. Okay.
And
Right.
finally, we have Sibeli.
Hi, Professor Sarah, Lama Sarah. It's a super pleasure to be here and meet you, because I'm from Chagdugompa too.
Oh,
and Chagdu Khandro speaks so highly of you.
Oh,
yes, really. She says, "Wow, Sarah."
Yeah, I love her. I love her. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, and I got a little late because I was just translating a public talk she was giving to visitors. So
oh, okay. From English?
From English into Portuguese.
I assume.
Yeah. And so I've been living here for quite a while now. And thanks to Khandro, she actually asked me to learn Tibetan. So I went to Tibet and studied at Tibet University for a year and a half.
Okay.
So I have some knowledge of Tibetan. I've done some interpretation from Tibetan into Portuguese directly a few times already, but I still have so much to learn. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to learn with Dharma Sagar and all these wonderful translators that come to share their experience. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. It's so great. It's really great to see the kind of fruition of Chakta Rinpoche's activities. I knew him pretty long time ago, way long time ago, when he was just in Oregon. And so it's like, this is the whole flowering of it. It gives me kind of inspiration. And all the others, I think I'm not so old that I don't know most of these lamas that you've mentioned, although some of the younger ones maybe not, but it's wonderful. First thing I need to learn is how to make my background fuzzy like yours, so all this junk in the back doesn't show. But someone's got to teach me. Maybe Dupchen, maybe you can do that, the fuzzy background. But anyway, yeah, I mean, we can just have a conversation. I didn't prepare a speech or anything. I don't really know even where to start. So I went to see a movie a couple of days ago, and it was about the making of the movie Fiddler on the Roof. Do you guys know about that film? Okay, so it was just about the making of it, and they had interviewed the producer or the director. I'm sorry, Jewison, and he. Fiddler on the Roof is a lot about Jewish community and Jewish culture. And he's not Jewish, even though he sounds Jewish because it's Jewison. But he says ever since he was little, he wanted to be Jewish, but he's not. And at one point, he meets the prime minister of Israel, not Netanyahu, way before. This is a long time ago in the 60s. I forgot which prime minister of Israel. And he confesses that he's always wanted to be Jewish. And the prime minister says, well, if you're anyone who's crazy enough to want to be Jewish is Jewish. And I feel like that's the same for translators. Anyone who's crazy enough to want to be a translator is a translator. And we don't have to worry about when am I a translator? When do I become a translator? You just have to be crazy. My one kind of conclusion after so many years of translating is that you have to love the craft itself. you have to actually enjoy it, the process of like unraveling these little, mysteries and transcribing them beautifully into whatever target language you have. And I guess in this case, it's either Portuguese or Spanish, but any other kind of motivation. I mean, that wasn't my original. I didn't even know how much I enjoyed it until I was doing it, or until a lot later, but all the other motivations, like saving the world or preserving Tibetan or helping people's practice or getting enlightened or all those other versions, they don't last as long. They're not going to get you through it to the end unless you actually enjoy the process. And it's a wonderful process and I enjoy it a lot. I mean, in fact, lately, just recently, I'm kind of right now in a, in between state where I have some manuscripts that are in, but I'm not working on a translation right now. And I realize how much I miss it. Like, I don't know what to do. What am I doing? So, and even when I'm not especially interested in the subject matter, it's still what I enjoy doing. The closest thing I have to that is like jigsaw puzzles. Do we know what jigsaw puzzle? Putting together all the pieces to making a beautiful, it's really kind of a same mental event, except for that it's visual instead of verbal. It's the same. What it is for visual is like how Tibetan is for the verbal world. So some of you, especially that have been doing other kinds of translating besides Tibetan, what that means. So yeah, I started though with the motivation of just wanting to understand what my, Lama was teaching me, Kala Rinpoche, like what was he saying anyway? It seemed like really important to try and understand him if he was going to be my Lama. And he had various translators, some French translators in the beginning when I met him back in 73, probably 1973. But I just found that kind of like irritating, that there was someone in between me and him. So so I wanted to become that irritating person, and so I did my best to learn Tibetan, and it was he just assigned me some kind of random monk in the monastery, and we started like full on learning. Then there weren't any materials at all at the time, so it was really from I just pulled it out of the space, I guess, that I was in. And then after I came back to the States, that was for about, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I studied both in Nepal and in India as best I could with various lamas, whoever would be willing. You usually had to do an exchange where you taught the lama English in exchange for Tibetan, and they always win, on that. They always get more English and you're lucky if you get a little Tibetan, and it usually consists of memorizing, some verses. But anyway, when I came back, then I also studied with a couple other translators, Western, translators, going through, and also really useful was listening to tapes of Tibetan speaking. So later on, I made tapes of Tibetan speaking when I did the Tibetan correspondence course, because I found that really useful. But with a tape recorder, going over and over and over again, what was that? What was that? And so, but it's hard to find people that are that, one-on-one willing to do that anymore. And then from then on, I just faked it. Really, I'm a total, just, I don't know. I did sort of kind of learn it. And also because I had to, in some cases, Kala Rinpoche was in here and would come and go. But I was lucky enough to find Dejung Rinpoche, a great Sakya Lama, great scholar. And he himself had kind of the way he put it, he had become a student of Kala Rinpoche, even though they were the same age and he was Sakya, but so he called him Dorje Chang, and he just was so kind and gave me so much time with him. And when I didn't understand something he said, he would just say it again and kind of push it into my mind, like, repeat it again and again until I kind of sort of got it. So he was a tremendous help. And then at the same time, there was Kala Rinpoche promising this 3-year retreat, but you had to know Tibetan. And so I put in a lot of effort to learn it. And even though I had felt like I kind of had already known it, I guess Kala Rinpoche didn't ever consider that I knew it. And so when I went over to France to start the retreat, he bragged to everyone that I'd learned Tibetan in just 1 year. You probably might come across this phenomena in speaking Tibetan where, I would say something before that time, I would say something to him, and then he would just turn to the translator. I would say it in Tibetan, perfectly, except for the accent. And then he'd look at the translator and have it translated. Like he just didn't believe it was Tibetan. And probably because it was like so bad, I don't know. But the translator would say it in exactly the same way, or exactly the same words, just maybe, I don't know what that is. It's confidence, I think. It's something like confidence. You just have to, jump in and say and do it, and with confidence, and then they'll maybe understand you. But then if you're in a place like many, many, many years later in Amdo in Tibet, long after I'd already translated a lot of books and everything, I'd say something and then people wouldn't even know it was Tibetan. They would just look at me like, what is that sound coming out of her voice? I mean, because they didn't have a concept that, someone looking like me would be speaking Tibetan, and because the dialect is so different. So that's another interesting and kind of discouraging experience. So anyway, after, and I did the retreat, apparently I had learned enough and did the retreat, and we did it all in Tibetan. So that was extra specially helpful. And then, and came out and got sent over to be, translating for some missionary lamas. And, I had to translate. So that was that. And actually my first time translating was for a young lama who was his first time teaching. So it was kind of good in a way, because we were both like, whoa, what is this? So that was a good push. And I actually don't know how I ever did it. You just have to, it's really hard, or interpreting orally, I think, because you have to translate so much more than just the language, the whole kind of cultural differences and everything. And you can't hesitate, because as soon as you hesitate, the Lama thinks you don't know Tibetan. That's also a discouraging event when that happens. And so you just have to kind of like, I don't know, what I do is I sort of just pretend like nobody's there. It's the best thing I can do, because if I really think about, everybody looking at me and listening to me and things, I can't, I can't, it's very difficult. And that served me well when I became a teacher in at Naropa University, because if I thought about, especially young people, they're not really listening. They're just looking at everything that's wrong with you, every little blemish and thing, and the weird clothes and bad, everything. If I thought about that, I would be paralyzed. So I just did I don't know, I can do this thing of, blocking it out. Or when we first got out of the 3 retreat and the whole world was like just this, like peeled eyes, fresh, scary place. And we were in France, and they took us to the beach, and it's topless in France, the beaches. And coming out of retreat, I was wearing robes for 3.5 years. And then I have to be naked in front of the whole world, literally. And there was just no way except to completely just pretend no one was there. I really wanted to go in the ocean because I'm from the coast in California, and the ocean is like this thing, and I had to get in it. But so anyway, that was my very first major translating experience, going to the ocean in Marseille or wherever it was. Anyway, or I think it was Aix-en-Provence actually. But so if you're brave enough, you can do the oral translating, and then also just beware that you get blamed for everything, because of course the Lama is, if it's a Tibetan Lama, then they're, already enlightened and floating in the air somewhere, and you will get blamed for anything. So I've been even, lamas, they get irritated, they get stern, they get all kinds of, they actually have emotions. We didn't know that. We don't want to believe it, but they do. And if you translate the emotion and the feeling behind something they say, you could get blamed for it. Like you're angry, not the Lama, or and after a while that got to be, there's a lot of projection on oral translators. It just became, and it's just such a brain burn. Chakta Rinpoche used to get really mad at me when I, after about 2 hours, my brain kind of turned to jello. And one time I don't know that he would have really hit me, but he raised his hand and, and so it gets hard, although he was wonderful to work with, because even though he had some kind of English, he couldn't really say what he wanted in English. I mean, he couldn't really get to the profound stuff that he could in Tibetan. So I felt very privileged when he could speak Tibetan and I could understand it. And it was like this rare and usually inaccessible store of knowledge. But it was also, always a little scary and stuff. But he was really kind to me. And he was the only one of all the Tibetan Lamas that when I would translate interviews, he would always give me half of whatever donation someone made, always. He was so careful about that. And in the early days, and I don't know, maybe even now, I don't know anymore, but in the early days, translators were considered, volunteers or slaves even, no one would think of reimbursing you because you were too lucky already to be sitting next to this holy being. And so that was much appreciated on his behalf. And when Chakta Rinpoche met me after the 3-year retreat, I was working as I was cleaning people's houses. I was a cleaner. And when he found that out, he was completely outraged. He just was like, no, this is not right. You do the 3-year retreat and all this stuff, and you don't do that. So he was really mindful of that. I think he had a more practical view because of him not being a monastic with a family and like the real life and kids and stuff. And, so he understood it better than monastics who just have that kind of feudal monastic system where the monks just do whatever you say, but they're supported. They're given food and a place to live. So that was kind of a nice change for me. Someone mentioned, translating for Nyingma Lamas, and actually translating for non-monastics is a different experience because they've had a different experience with their life. Yeah. So I don't know what else. If you're thinking you're going to make money or get famous, forget that. That's not, so you do have to sort of accept whatever comes your way. And I mentioned that one lucky thing, and Sadra Foundation finding me and supporting my written work was a huge lucky thing, and I'm still supported by them, although I don't, at first I could choose what I wanted to translate, and then that changed. So then I just became like a, kind of Amazon worker, translators, doing whatever they decided was important. But, so now I'm kind of, I have 10 books published, 2 came out this year, and 5 of them are huge, big anthologies, like with a bunch of stuff in them. And I don't want to do that anymore. I can't do that anymore. I just want to do some smaller projects, but that's done for whatever good it did. I don't know. And mostly for researchers, so, I mean, it was all collections of practice texts, but, would anybody buy a book this big to do one practice that they can find in it? No, they're going to find a copy of it and, make a copy and then do it. But so anyway, at least they're there somehow available for people who want to do those practices. So I don't know, do you have questions or anything, or any particular thing anyone wants to talk about? You can raise your hand. Okay, I'll call on Angelica.
Yeah, I think that's something that comes up for me hearing your experiences, that there's a generational change now, I feel. Yeah. I'll say with mostly, I'll give 2 examples with Mingyur Rinpoche and Dzogchen Ponlo Rinpoche. So Mingyur Rinpoche is actually very easy to translate in my experience, because he speaks in very short sentences, either in Tibetan or English. So you can translate them, but you need to be able to express his feeling, that freshness that he's conveying. You need to be able to be very clear on that. And I found that to be very refreshing, and it's just kind of a switch in your mind. Whereas when you're translating a more traditional person, you're really taking notes, and you're really trying to say what they're saying within the tradition. But Mingyur steps out of that, and that's what makes him so outside of his realization, so engaging. Yeah. And then Dzogchen Ponlo Rinpoche, when I've translated for him in English, he will translate and then he'll switch into Tibetan, and then he'll say something in Tibetan very within the very traditional manner. And then he will, he's got an amazing translator actually that can actually render that into English in a way that's very accessible. But then Rinpoche will then speak in English and speak in very English American idioms. So sometimes for me, it's easier to translate, to capture the Tibetan, and to translate it, because my brain is kind of a little bit used to that kind of framework, But when he switches and he speaks into English, and he says something that is only in English, it's very hard to say that into Spanish, because my brain has been, it's like 2 different things. So what I'm saying is, and I think about it and then I say it, but what I'm saying is that nowadays the more, I don't know the lamas from Tibet or the Ordo lamas. I cannot even include His Holiness Karmapa in this category, but there is some lamas that are younger that have a more fresher approach, and therefore our translation has to be different, because they will know English. Yes. They will be able to switch back and forth. This is only for oral translation I'm speaking.
Right. Yeah, I mean, definitely. The old traditional lamas are much different, thing. I translated one time for Mingyur Rinpoche, and I was just kind of irritated that I was translating at all, because his English is so good. I mean, he was perfectly capable. I felt like more like a little kind of English teacher. But, and people always would prefer to hear it directly from the Lama. Chaktu Rinpoche was a perfect example with his terrible English that he did in Tibetan grammar style, but using English words. And but no matter how terrible it was, he would people would rather hear him speak, even though I felt like they were missing all the good stuff. But and I experienced the same thing when he would switch back and forth, kind of from bad English to Tibetan. You know, it was kind of just a minute. And in fact, one time I got stuck translating for Trungpa Rinpoche, whose English was brilliant, you know, and he just was, you know, having fun with me or something. I don't know. And so I did translate for him, and then he said something in English and I didn't even recognize it. I didn't realize he said some things in English. It was so embarrassing. I was like, what? I'm sorry. I don't. Yeah. And working in 3 languages, I can't imagine, you know, it would, that would be very, very hard. I haven't tried to do that. The times I've translated, like in Colombia, for instance, and, you know, there was always a translation from my English to Spanish, and I could pick up mistakes, kind of, you know, but I couldn't have done it. I could not have done it myself. So yeah, I definitely, a lot depends on this, whether the Lama, if it's a Tibetan Lama, how skillful they are in using a translator. And so first of all, knowing knowing the translator personally and what their skills are, but also, yeah, like the short sentences, waiting for the translation to happen, even if it means correcting if they understand English, correcting it. That makes all the difference in the world. I mean, some lamas go on for 20, 30 minutes in Tibetan without a break. You know, in the old style, they didn't stop. They never stopped. And then they get like, you can't take notes fast enough. And also, I don't know about you, but when I took notes, it would be, you know, I couldn't read them afterwards. They would be just like part Tibetan, part Wiley, part phonetics, part English, part, you know, just a complete disaster, just page after page after page of illegible stuff. But it somehow made it possible for me to remember it better. The act of writing made me feel like, and at least I could not skip whole parts. I feel like it's a trade-off a little. People who can translate without taking notes maybe are better because they get the subtle nuance, you know, they get all the fuller things, but they risk missing a whole section. And then I just didn't have enough, I don't think I have usually enough confidence. I've translated simultaneous translating a couple of times when there's a multi-language thing going on. And that's okay because you're talking at the same time pretty much. But for these long, like, you know, 20 minutes or so, if I didn't write it down, I would just kind of panic, I think. Even though I can't read it after, I would still panic. I don't know. But you're absolutely right. There's a whole new generation. I mean, actually, oral translation into English is almost a thing of the past because there just aren't going to be the same, those Tibetan lamas that come out of places where they've learned, you know, they pretty much know not only English, but also kind of modernity, you know, modern customs and phrases and things. So you're right. There's a robot hand up with Sibella.
Okay, I'm just going to put my hand down first. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Sarah, because sometimes I had the experience of sort of having to filter what the Lama is saying a little bit. I always felt awkward about that, but there were times really where, so maybe I just wanted to hear from you. Like there was one time specifically where the Lama was a more traditional, very Tibetan kind of traditional Lama with not much experience with Westerners. And he was answering questions. We were in retreat to a group of us. and he was speaking in Tibetan, but then he was kind of rude to the people, saying, "Oh, you're stupid. How come you can ask these kind of things?" So of course I cut all that from the translation. Wouldn't translate that thing, and I took the liberty to sort of soften his way of addressing the people. And then, so this is one thing. But then the other thing is, if the person, for instance, if the Lama makes a mistake, which is, it's not that they don't know, but just they are talking and then something they say, okay, instead of saying Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, they just say, oh, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Sambhogakaya, and don't say the Nirmanakaya.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and then there's no time really to ask the Lama, because then that whole thing of stopping and asking and all that stuff. So do we take the liberty when it's obvious by the context to do these corrections on our own? How does it work for you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a can of worms. Oh yeah, totally. And of course there are lamas who actually don't know. You know, it just kind of depends on the level of the lama. You don't kid yourself. They're not all omniscient, but yeah, that is really, really hard. I've had so many versions of that happen. Absolutely. If it's an obvious mistake, I feel like most lamas would want you to fix that, and just go ahead and say it. And I with some, just kind of, I don't want to say low level lama, but just kind of ordinary monks out of a monastery. Yeah, you got to do that a lot. Sometimes you get things totally wrong. They're just, they're not all, it depends on who they are, but they're not all scholars. They're not all learned, just growing up in a monastery, at least in a lot of Kala Rinpoche's lamas that he sent out to the world, the missionaries, I call them, they weren't all, some of them were very, did study, but not all of them by any means, because that was never an emphasis. They all had done a 3 retreat, but they didn't necessarily read the commentaries. Huh? So yeah, I think you have to fix that. As far being the rude ones, I was saying this difficulty of their emotions, you'll be blamed if you translate that rudeness. Or a phenomena that's made me very uncomfortable is sometimes real arrogance. They're really kind of bragging about which I think is in the culture of Tibet is fine. That's a very acceptable way to be. But in our culture, not so much. Makes me kind of go, ooh, and it's kind of almost hard to translate it. You know what I mean? It's like, and I mean, in those cases, what I've done, I think out of, I inadvertently, not meaning to, but I soften it, I think, because I just can't be that way. But sometimes I'll just say, and usually I translate in first person. I did this, I did that. But in those cases, I might say, Rinpoche says, and then, because I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't. Let's say I'm so great. I've had so many realizations and I'm the one that everyone comes to. And, nobody else is like me. I can't say that. It just doesn't come out of my mouth. And so, and they can, especially like Tertons and things, that's part of the culture of that culture. As you know, like maybe from reading Janet Jatso's book on Jigme Lingpa, if any of you read that, that's a brilliant analysis that she does about why is a Buddhist bragging so much when there's supposed to be no self, and anyway, you can read that introduction. What's it called? Something of a self. I can't remember the name, but yeah. So how much liberty to take on those things. And that's part, really it's part of cultural translation. You're not just translating words, you're translating into a different culture. And sometimes, the same Lama saying the same thing will be a different audience and you use different words. If it's like a bunch of their devoted students, then you say it one way. If it's a kind of general audience in public, you might say it another. If it's a kind of a closed cult, like say Shambhala, you would use their language. I often had to translate for them. So I would use the particular language that they have, so things would make sense to them, So you have to kind of understand your audience. That particular thing, I mean, I've had lamas say very pointed things to a question, and it's been very effective. So if I think it's just, in a kind way, but still a point, that can be very effective. And I would hate to lose that. I would hate to not cover that up, because that's a kind of like a kindness and a pointing out, really. But if they're just kind of nasty, then I don't know, don't translate for them. I don't know what to say. I mean, that should be, children in Tibet get treated pretty bad. When I was in the monastery, Kala Rinpoche's monastery, the person they appointed, that Kala Rinpoche appointed as my kind of gegen, was the gegen of the children. And I would see him like whack their little bald heads with pens and, just, and so it's a different culture that, you have to accommodate it somehow by being flexible with who the audience is and trying to understand in your understanding whether that rough comment would be helpful or not, or would it be just, oh my God. And even they can't, one time Trungpa Rinpoche, and bless his heart, he's the nicest, kindest, most compassionate person ever. And this young man that had a lot of pimples, complexion problems. And he comes up to him and Trungpa Rinpoche says, "What happened to your face?" Oh my God. And I mean, what am I going to say? It was a personal kind of just encounter. It wasn't a public thing. And so I said that, and that was really disastrous, actually, for a teenager. That's a disaster to say something like that. But anyway, I don't know. Good luck. Yeah. Other questions? I mean, now for the last, gosh, when was it that I retired from, I officially retired from oral translating because, and kind of got the word out, because I didn't want to seem like I was saying no to some lamas who might still try and get me. I mean, they try and get me, but, I'll just say, oh no, I retired. I'm retired from oral translation. And so that, end of story. So that was probably about 20 years ago, maybe. Remember, I got into this whole business when I was 20 and I'm 70. So it's been a while. And yeah, so since then I've just been working on written translation, which is a lot more forgiving in a way. I mean, it's really hard, but you're not on the spot all the time. So are people working on written translation as well? Or I know Dharma Saga Dharma is focusing on oral, which is really good, because you really can't do written translation unless you can ask a Tibetan scholar or a Tibetan informant of some kind questions in Tibetan. You have to be able to, clear up your written work. Anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
here's,
I don't want to, maybe Nuno goes first, because.
Okay, Nuno. And then I'll come back, Siddha.
Sure.
Okay, let me put my hand down again. Okay, so yeah, about this adapting to the new culture and softening stuff, not only in oral translation but in written translation. There's some sort of a risk of adapting too much that it doesn't sound like the Lama we're translating anymore. Especially in written translation, I think it's quite difficult to get that. Because I don't want my translations to be all so standardized that they sound like me. You know, I don't want the translation to sound like me. I want them to sound like the Lama I'm translating, or the scholar or teacher I'm translating. So what should I pay attention to in order for that feeling to be also captured and transmitted to the, you know, so that they can feel they're reading the source text, not the translator, you know, not my personal taste.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a slippery slope, as they say. It's a gray area. It's hard to know. You have to, each situation in each context, you have to take. I just recently wrote an article actually kind of about that for, there's a new, it's called Tibet Journal of Literature, or Tibetan, something like that. No, Journal of Tibetan Literature, JTL. It's a new journal that's coming out. And I think it's very different with oral translation or a written translation. With oral translation, you can definitely tell or ask what the Lama means or what he feels, or she, you know. So in that case, your attempt to be invisible might kind of be successful somewhat. But with written translation, especially ancient texts, you know, which is really anything that, except for contemporary teacher, I've always felt, I mean, there is that theory that, well, you should translate it so that the reader has the same experience that was intended by the writing in the first place. But how do you know that? I always think that that's kind of an arrogance. How do you actually know what someone in the 14th century meant? Yeah, I mean, your skills in Tibetan would have to be just astonishing to know the different nuances of each century in Tibet, you know, each context, each geographical area, each, you know, different school or lineage. I mean, you know, maybe an incredible Tibetan translator, like someone maybe like Thupten Jinpa, who I think is the best English, has the best English. He can do that because he's Tibetan and he's studied and his English is excellent. But, you know, not too many of us can do that, can tell. I mean, can you tell by reading something what century it came from, or what geographical area, or what was going on in that geographical area at the time? Because, you know, sometimes they're in the middle of a war, or sometimes, or a sectarian war, you know, or, you know, there's all kinds of circumstances. It's very difficult. The first thing I would say is to really try and understand the circumstance of any text. Who is speaking to whom? Where are they? Are they in a monastery or in the cave, or are they in the village, or, you know, and why were they, what were they doing? Or are they writing? You know, are they speaking or are they writing? You know, a lot of times they're speaking and some scribe is taking notes, and then written. And then I found a lot of issue with that about gender. You know, some of the female teachers speak, and then the lineage from then on is men speaking for her, you know, and it is inevitably changed. You can bet. And how do you go back? How do you figure out what she might have meant? Where is her voice, you know? So it's a lot of problem with the written one. And we've had a lot of conferences about translation now, like lots of them. And not just Tibetan translation, but translation of all kinds, and written translation. And the general consensus among all modern thinkers is that, forget it, you're making a new creation. Your written translation is a new creation. You can't not acknowledge that. You can't pretend that, you know, you're really channeling, like on a psychic level. You know, you can do your best, but it's still you speaking. It is still your voice. And if it's in Spanish or Portuguese, it's definitely in your voice, because language also affects very strongly the way we think. You know, you can't think unless you're thinking completely in Tibetan, you can't think like, if you know, your mind has been from the time you learned language, which is usually, you know, 2, walk at 1, talk at 2, right? 2 years old is the time you get a hold of language. And I have like grandchildren and all that, so I've been watching this. And your mental patterns are already set kind of from that time on. So you just have to know that, you know, you're trying to allow access to the time period and to the person, but it's still a new creation. Your translation is a new creation. It's not the same thing. And also, there's been a lot of discussion about this thing about, what's it called? It's called something like foreignisms or something, where, you know, are you going to say that, say like, well, it's like curing rawhide by putting it into the fire and making it soft, you know, or are you going to use a different metaphor? Are you going to talk about, you know, milking the doe and herding the yak, or are you going to talk about like cows and sheep? You know, it's how much of that foreign stuff are you going to bring in? I mean, I kind of like to do that, because if anything, that reminds people, oh yeah, this is maybe a rural society. It's a different society that's speaking. So I tend to keep those things if they're at all understandable. Sometimes you have to make footnotes, you know, like a common one you see is, you know, something is as white as butter. And actually most of our butter is yellow because they put dye in it. But, you know, something like that people won't understand, you might have to say something or change it. It's as white as snow or something, you know, but I think like each situation is a little bit, each and every, even on the same page, you might decide to do a different thing with 2 different situations. You know, if it makes sense for a reader to keep a foreign kind of image, then you do that. But if it's going to make no sense whatsoever, then what's the point, you know? And also, this is another thing where some of those old sayings, you have no idea what they mean. They believe things that we wouldn't believe, you know, like a Bhutanese Lama I translate for a lot, thinks if that you there's a proverb, kind of a phrase in Tibetan, a tampe, you know, like a proverb, if you twist a snake like this, the feet will come out. And you know, we just don't think snakes have feet. I'm not going to say they do or don't, but whatever, they think they do. So that's a useful kind of image for meditation. You have to squeeze your mind and really put in some effort, and then, you know, you'll get some movement. But, you know, so that's another example of things where you really might need to change it or explain it in a footnote or something like that. So, I mean, I appreciate the wish and the desire to bring the voice from old to now. I mean, of course, that's what we do. That's what I've done for these last, you know, wait, was it 50 years? But it's impossible. You still have to try, but it's impossible. We know that well as Buddhists anyway, right? We're gonna liberate all sentient beings. It's impossible, but you have to try. So, yeah, same thing. Okay, Sibella, did you have something to add to that, or?
Well, actually, I have many
a new thing. That's fine.
No,
okay.
I want to ask you about what you just said and about other things that you have.
Okay.
So one thing I wanted to ask you, maybe this is a little bit of a touchy problem, but the thing of being a woman, translator and student and practitioner of Tibetan Buddhism, especially when you started when Tibetans were actually first coming
Yeah.
and there was not this like political correction kind of thing. And so how was your experience of being a woman, having to translate or whatever, work under Tibetans? This is one I just wanted to ask your.
It was horrible.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you, if you could share a little bit with us, what's your process of translating a text? Like, are there any, how do you do it? If there anything you would like to share with us of your process of when you start a new text?
Okay. Yeah, being a woman, that was a real pain in the neck. It really was. And I was kind of already politically correct. I mean, my mother was a very, successful screenwriter and the boss of the family. And then even my grandmother was an amazing. So I'm not new to that problem. I mean, my mother in the world of Hollywood had huge troubles, and Broadway, as I've just recently seen, because her play has been revived. But I was naive a little bit in thinking that I, as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old little, California hippie, could just join a monastery with all the monks and just be one of the boys. That was really kind of stupid of me. And of course, it ran into a lot of trouble that way. But at the same time, I mean, the whole patriarchal thing of the Tibetans is, well, and everyone, is like really hard and unpleasant. And I think as long as you maintain ideas that somehow Buddhists, including the Buddha all the way down, are supposed to be not, gender equity, then it's always going to be like this trouble. But then if you realize that Tibetans are just like the rest of the world of patriarchy, then, then you'll be able to deal with it better, because it is like that. It's just terrible. And maybe it's getting better. Some lamas are better. Boka Rinpoche was better than Kala Rinpoche that way. I mean, of course, they'll all say, oh, yeah, everybody has Buddha nature, so everybody's going to get enlightened, and men and women are just the same. And they're going to say that, but it's really hard for them to integrate that internally. So, and even like Kala Rinpoche used to say, well, if women were in the position of power, then the bodhisattvas would be born as women. But since they're not, the bodhisattvas are born as men, and so it just continues the issue forever that way. So we just have to move on. We're not going to go back and change Tibet, right? So, or even maybe Tibetans. And so, eventually they'll. I remember I've co-taught in Naropa with a number of Tibetan lamas, and one of them was Rinpoche, and he was using a translation. It was a Buddha nature class. So he was using a translation, and the British are kind of behind with all this gender language, and even though the text was translated by a woman, it was all gendered. It was he, using pronouns. And Rinpoche had a habit of like reading whole passages and then talking about them. He'd read it and then talk about it. In other words, he would not read it before class like I would. He would read it in the class and then talk about it. And he even actually, after like halfway through the semester, realized that he'd stop and go, yeah, it is kind of weird to always say he, talking about like Buddha or enlightenment or anything like that. So, it's a matter of kind of getting used to something. And he eventually got used to that, realizing that it didn't sound right. It was just not right. So, but that takes a lot. And not every Tibetan Lama has the opportunity to be in a classroom like that and do that kind of thing. You can't just say to them, hey, we're the same or something. Same but different, or anyway. So in terms of, and of course in the written language, and this is one of my biggest problems, and going back to Nuno's question too, written written gendered exclusive gender use is difficult to get over. And then sometimes they'd say terrible, terrible things about women in the texts. I mean, oh my God, what do you do with that? Do you totally change it? Or do you want people to know that that's how it was? And then you have to footnote it. And I've often thought that we should have, how in the news now they say this may be offensive before they give the news. We have little warnings, in the text, like the following may be, offensive to the gender issues. But anyway, in terms of how I do a text, I don't have good habits. So I generally don't want you to do what I do. You can probably do better. I'm very impatient. I don't know what's wrong with me after all those teachings that I can't wait. So I just pretty much dive into it. And then I go back and fix it, So of course, I try and find out who wrote it. Like I was saying, who wrote it and what was the context and what was going on in Tibet. That's more recent in my habits, because working with some, trying to find out the historical background and overcoming the tendency that I think I had at the very beginning to think that all Dharma was like somehow, had no time or space. It was like, it was the angels singing or something. It's not. It's very much, I started, just for example, I started to translate a commentary to Vajrayogini practice by Pao Tsutlak Trengwa, very great Lama. And I thought it was going to be like a commentary about Vajrayogini practice, which would be useful for people to have, who a lot of people are doing that practice. And the whole first second, like 50 pages or something, was this big argument. It was a big argument about whether or not Marpa had the blessing of Vajrayogini. And I ended up writing a whole art, presentation that I did at a conference about that, because it blew me away. Like, of course, Marpa has Vajrayogini's blessing. What is that? But it was not even about that. And what I had to realize was that this was a huge hot topic at the time because of Sakya Pandita writing a total put down of the Kargyu lineage for giving Vajrayogini empowerments, giving people Mahamudra before they did any kind of empowerment in Vajrayana. So it was all a rebuttal about Sakya Pandita, which I would not have known because Sakya Pandita was several hundred years earlier. But things were slow in Tibet, like he writes a devastating book about the Kargyu, and then like 200 years later, someone's going, hey, wait a minute. But anyway, so you do it. Had I never found that out, how would I have, so that's kind of when I started to realize that there's stuff going on in Tibet when these great writers, these great authors were writing, and it's not all what it seems. He didn't call it the counter argument. He called it a commentary on Vajrayogini. And I mean, he does go on to give a commentary on Vajrayogini, but so I do try and find out that. But what you should do is really, you should read the whole book first, but I don't do that. I just can't. I don't know. I'm just, like I said, impatient, and I just start translating, and then I figure it out later. And that's why, like, I don't give a final title to anything, and I don't do like the table of contents until later. I mean, I do it, but it's temporary. Doing a table of contents is very helpful for your organization, but that's especially for if you're doing like anthologies. So I start doing it. I do the best that I can. I don't rush it. I don't just go blur unless I'm just taking notes, but I make real English sentences, and I try to, get it right. And I highlight it if I still have questions in it, if I don't get it. And then I go to a certain length, however long I'm going to work that day. The next day, I come back and I go over whatever I've done to see if it makes sense and to see if the English is sounding okay. You know, that to me, that's actually really important. If the target language is not nice, people won't read it. It won't be communicated. It'll be horrible. It'll be hard to read and then they'll stop. So I find that really important. And when I used to teach Tibetan in school, in the college, I really, really pounded that in with the students, you know, that the English had to be really good English. And I'd give their papers back so many times if they didn't, because your mind is in the Tibetan, your mind is in just trying to put some words to it, and you don't think about the actual, you know, other language. And I feel like that's really important. So I do that. Then if I can, I find some poor, sorry Tibetan scholar or Lama to try and answer my questions. They hate doing that, and I don't blame them, but, you know, and they're getting harder and harder to catch, you know, either they're too important because they're like tulkus or something, or they're too uneducated and then they really can't. And then sometimes if there's proverbs, you have to find somebody from a certain area, or at least a very old Tibetan, to help with like little proverbs that modern Tibetans don't know. Even the young lamas don't, you know, young tulkus often don't know those little weird terms where they come from. And I found that I have a good friend here in Boulder who's Amdoan, and he does translation now from Chinese to Tibetan, I think. But you know, if it's like an Amdoan author, he might know some weird little reference that nobody knows. He's helped me with a couple of things, even though he's, you know, currently he's married to an American, and it's just so, or it depends, you know, if it's like a philosophical thing, I try and find a Lama who's good at philosophy, and it's just pretty tricky. I don't have too many resources here. You have more, you know, and you're getting more and more, but yeah. And then I go through that, and then I go through one last time to put those changes in, to recheck the Tibetan if I feel like I need to. But then just remember, if you're going to be published, then you have to do the whole thing again when you have copy editor. And I have found also that if it's a good copy editor, they'll say, well, what does this exactly, you know, mean? And then they usually have some intuition, like, oh, I didn't really understand that. You know, if they make a question about something, I go back and check and I see, oh, that's because I didn't understand it, you know, and then I try and change that. And I try not to, my worst kind of tendency is because I pretty much know that hardly anyone's going to be reading it, let alone checking it. And just kind of go, oh, well, whatever, you know, no one's going to do. So, but when it gets into thousands and thousands of pages, it's hard not to do that, to fall into that trap, you know, to say like, yeah, nobody really cares if this hand is holding a cat, or, you know, deities with like millions of arms holding different things, and what are those things, and you've never heard of them, and, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, is that helpful at all? Or yeah,
very much so. Thank you so
that's
much.
just me. But if you're really doing good, you should try and read the whole text. And then, of course, ultimately the best thing is to read with a Lama, a Tibetan Lama who is knowledgeable, who's learned, you know. Read through the whole thing with a commentary. And when Kala Rinpoche, when we were starting our translation committees in India and everything, and, you know, he had some very good lamas there for us to ask questions. Khenpo Tsogyam Jamso was there, and as well as, some really great lamas you could ask questions. But Khenpo Tsogyam, you couldn't ask him a question because he didn't believe in it. He was like, no, we have to go through the whole text from the beginning, and I'll give a commentary to the whole thing. And then, you know, you can ask questions. And of course, we didn't do that. And that was like a little tension between Kalu Rinpoche and Khenpo Tsultrim and his students. It's funny. So that's, of course, best case scenario if you have that chance. But I've never had that chance. So, okay, questions? Anything or someone?
Can you talk about it from the perspective of practice, how translation has helped your practice, or do you consider it your practice, or have you?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
encountered
Yeah, these
obstacles?
days it is my practice, really. It is like a practice for me because it calms me down, it focuses my mind, you know, do the things that practice is supposed to do. Whereas when I actually sit in front of the shrine and try and meditate, like, you know, I'm just agitated and think, oh, I better go translate because it's my job. But practice helped a lot in the material I translate, like the 3 retreat and things like that. Not in the way you think so much, not in any kind of like far out metaphysical way, but familiarity with the actual practices, with the terms and the, you know, ritual objects, the rituals, especially rituals. I mean, Vajrayana is all about ritual. So if you've never done the rituals, you really hard to know what they're talking about when you translate those texts. So that's been very helpful. And the languages of sort of like pointing out instructions and stuff also to have some kind of clue about what it is they're trying to point out. And yeah, it's been, and also, I don't know, I ended up translating a lot of Wangpei, you know, like the text they use to give empowerments. And if I hadn't received a lot of those, first of all, I wouldn't be qualified to translate them. But secondly, I wouldn't know what they were talking about. You know, I mean, they're so weird. It's so strange. Who says what? And then you repeat this and you do that. And so that kind of familiarity in what I do has been hugely important for me. If somehow if people had me, and it also is, of course, very helpful for translating in oral translating, because you never know what you're going to get. And I've been a little more, you know, challenged when some lamas decide to talk the whole time about Madhyamaka and stuff, but I can do that. I know, thanks to oral translating, I have enough and my teaching at Naropa where I can do that if I have to. If I had to translate a lot of books on philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, then the retreat and my practice wouldn't probably do any good at all. Something else would. I should have got a PhD if I was going to do that, right, in Buddhist studies. Like that isn't in my training, and luckily I haven't had to do written translation on it too much, but I did have to teach it, so I kind of had to learn it. But my practice doesn't much help that. I don't really think it has that much to do with practice, although there's plenty of great Galupa Lamas who would argue with that. But is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think, how do you make sure that it's not an intellectual exercise, the written translation?
The act of translating?
That is not purely that.
I don't know if you can separate out the intellect from every other part of the mind. And I feel like we sometimes are, as Buddhist practitioners, we're like, the intellect has become the boogeyman. You know, we shouldn't be scared of it. It's just another energy of mind. It's just another awareness. It's Rikpa, you know, unimpeded, manifesting everywhere. So it is an intellectual, absolutely is it. I mean, so I had no training because there were no training materials, and I just figured it out Tibetan because I'm intellectual. because I'm smart, if I dare say that. So, yeah, I mean, you have to have heart in it too. If you want to make that, bifurcation of mind and heart, you have to appreciate what's being said in the Tibetan from a non-intellectual point of view, I guess, like, oh, wow, that's, it's beautiful, actually, all the time. Like, wow, that's amazing. That how I used to feel with Dr. Rinpoche when he'd speak Tibetan. I mean, it was just like blown away by how amazing what he says in Tibetan is. Like, but, I don't know, if I was writing it, then I just have to use my brain. But I don't really like to make those, some people, part of the unimpededness, part of the unimpeded nature of mind is dance and music and love and all these other things. But it's also intellect. For me, it is. But I still hate Buddhist philosophy. No, I don't. It's amazing. Buddhist philosophy is amazing. I'm just too lazy to get, to try and translate it. It's too complicated. I should send you this like amazing literal translation that I think Edward Kantz did way long ago it was about the word, it was, to be, it was kind of like the ultimate, it is and isn't. You may, yin, min, it's kind of this, makes no sense whatsoever when you try and translate it. Yes, up here, Facundo. Sorry, Luchen, are you okay? All right, yeah.
Can I ask? Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not related strictly with the translation, but I would like to ask you about that period in between when you finish your retreat and when you start the translation. How was for you? It was a hard time, or
yeah,
you
well,
deal with that period?
Yeah, coming out of retreat at first was it was wonderful, it was incredible. It was like really like new mind, new. It was like, yeah, it was like, I don't know, there was no expectations, there was no investment. And so everything was wonderful. It didn't matter what it was. It was not good or bad. It was just super interesting. But I couldn't hold on to that because, Kala Rinpoche decided to send me kind of sooner than everyone else. First, we were traveling around Europe with him, and that was really nice. But then he sent me to Los Angeles. He thought that's where I would like to be because I'm from California, but that was a real downer in Los Angeles. I mean, first of all, was really smoggy. So you're breathing this, horrible air, and it's really busy and everybody's really messed up. And he sent me to a Dharma center where the Lama also was not coping. In fact, I had to go back early because the Lama that he sent to Los Angeles had ran away. And I had to find him. And then the 16th Karmapa came, and I had to bring that Lama to the 16th Karmapa. And, that man was a very scary man, the 16th Karmapa, if he's not happy. I mean, when he was laughing, it was like the sun came out. But when he was mad, it was like the storm cloud, so that was, and from then on, it got kind of difficult. And so eventually, but I was translating for that Lama, who is still like one of my dearest friends, Lama Dorje. He's in New Mexico. And I realized that, and then also, I got pregnant maybe way too soon before I should have. And I decided that, and that he and I and my boyfriend all were not doing well in Los Angeles. And so I kind of arranged for us to go to New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a wonderful place. And it's a lot like Nepal. So we felt comfortable there. So I brought him there and continued to translate for him. Oh, you have a cat. And oh, I love brown tabbies. I have 2 of them. They're great cats. Anyway, and then I started, that was where in New Mexico, I started working on some translations. I mean, I'd worked on like a few prayers or something, but never a lot. And then Khenpo Tsultrim came one time to that Dharma Center in New Mexico, and he gave me a text by Zhonglun Control about, which became the book Creation and Completion that the first published book that I did. And he helped, Khenpo Tsultrim answered some questions. So did Bokar Rinpoche. That was the first time where 2 lamas who I respect tremendously said different things in answer to my questions. That was hard. That was really, really like, oh my God, what do I do? And, Khenpo Tsultrim is a great scholar and practitioner. Bokar Rinpoche is a practitioner that beyond what you could imagine, so I didn't know how to go with it. I basically chose one of them and put the other one in a footnote. But anyway, that was the first book I did. And that's, when I started working and it was a lot to, I had kids, and then there was the Dharma Center and the stupa and the Lama Dorje and the, me at night, I would do my little translation on the first ever Mac book, like it's an antique thing, and but I managed to get that out. So that's how the process kind of went. And, I never thought about this till many, many years later, but my mother was a writer, and I found, you always want to not be what your mother is. Usually growing up, whatever she is, you're going to be the other thing. But somehow it was really weird to find myself doing exactly what she used to do, except she made a whole lot more money than I did, but because she was working for Hollywood, but so I realized though that I've always loved old classic books, always, all the way back to and I just always had an idea of dusty old books. I just didn't know it would be Tibetan. and being a kind of scholar hit up in the bell tower of some castle, looking at ancient old books. Anyway, that's what I ended up doing. And it was the right thing to find. It was really I think I was an okay teacher too, as far as classroom, because I can talk a lot, but I really, like I said, right at the beginning, I love the process of the translating. By the way, just to kind of get maybe end or something on a lighter note, and the question that went before about how do you soften it or make it better? Have you guys watched Game of Thrones? Anybody? Oh, so a few people. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Do you remember the translator? I think Cassandra was her name or something like that. Or Melisandre. Do you remember her? What she did? Okay. So you should that should be part of the class. You get that clip from from Game of Thrones. It was hilarious. But that's why they call translators, traitors. Translator is a traitor, because if you don't change it a little, then, they would have all been killed. If she hadn't softened in the translation what was happening, then, there'd have been a lot more dead people. So that's just one thing to think about. Okay, Drupchen, you had the...
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I just wanted to hear from you. I saw in one of the video in the several conferences that you had this coffee shop test for the target language translations. So I wanted to hear that from you.
Oh, right. I don't know if I had it. Yeah. Well, we used to talk about kindness to the reader, being kind to the reader, like don't make it hard for them. And then the test is like, if you're in a coffee shop and someone asks you, like, well, so what is this emptiness thing? Are you able to, or anything, what are all the gods in Tibetan Buddhism? Or, endless kind of questions you might get. Are you able to explain it in a way that it works in a coffee shop setting, not like in a shul or, somewhere where you're studying the Torah or, I mean, it has to, not everybody is a scholar and not everybody is learned and not everybody even is very articulate, not everyone has a big vocabulary. So, and the other thing with that too is that if you're a Buddhist practitioner and all your friends are Buddhist practitioners and you're in a center or something, you kind of forget your native language a little bit, how people are speaking on the street. I do, and you start rattling off, things like, compassion and whatever, just stuff that has this big background in Tibetan Buddhism, but it's either not what people are saying on the street, or it is, or they're saying it meaning something totally different. So you have to not forget that language in order to be kind to the reader, in order that the kindness to the reader has to do both with having beautiful language when you write, but also comprehensible, so they don't have to look up too many words. I just found one word I put in my latest translation that was difficult. It's called dithiram. I couldn't help it. But, one word that you would have to look up. Dithiram is the old poems to the god Dionysus that are like so flowery and overdone, singing to his greatness, the god Dionysus. And sometimes, Sundep supplications, they sound like too much to me. Like I don't actually believe a word of it, and so I use the word dithiram to describe it. But basically you should not use those if you can help it, but not also don't dumb down, don't, if for written translation, don't dumb it down, but just think of your poor readers trying to read it, or or the copy editor. Don't be mean to the copy editor or the indexer. Don't forget your indexer. My indexer is a good friend of mine, so I use her a lot. And she also checks my Sanskrit, so she knows what she's doing. Anyway, is that what you meant? Yeah, I can't remember all the things that I say because I say too much. It was the one lesson as a teacher I could never learn. As a teacher, you have to learn what not to say. Because you can talk forever, too much. And so I never learned that very well, that lesson. So any more? Are we super enthusiastic now about our learning Tibetan, becoming translators, becoming traders? Okay, cool. Good. You guys are great. It's so heartening to see young people, you're young to me, young people like, getting into it, and it's going to get better and better. And you've got so much material now. You've got, resources, and you can look stuff up really fast, and you don't have to have all these like books and yeah. So, and the computer thing is amazing that I can barely use. Like, how do you fuzz out the background? But anyway, So very nice to meet you, and yeah, keep it up. Keep going on it. I'm very inspired by you all. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't tell me if there was a time limit, so it seems like it's wrapping up. There's no more questions. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It was wonderful. It was a lot of fun too. Thank
Oh,
you so
good.
much.
That's the main thing. Yeah, if you don't enjoy it, forget it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll leave now. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.